Hi, Ms. Rodriguez. Thank you so much for joining and having this interview for the moviemusement.com. I saw the movie actually, I believe last year or the year before, but I watched it again on the last night. So it's a very a complex story. As someone who lives in Canada, I know that um, the people's perception of the refugees, whether it's political or whether it's because of the domestic violence or whether it's because you've been hunted by some other people that want to either get you and now you have to come to Canada. So the character Aurora, she embodies and she kind of tells the story pretty much of every single person that wants to find the peace in one country, but then she realizes that whatever you're running from, it always goes after you, whatever you are. What was for you to actually to brainstorm that kind of idea in your head
Mhm.
and tell it in that way?
Yeah, I think that I mean, obviously all experiences are different, but when I was doing development for the film, when I was thinking about it, one of the first things that I did was talk to different Colombian uh, immigrants and refugees and friends of mine and people in my community to just kind of talk about how we had entered the country. And I think although we have all entered the country under different circumstances, like not, like I have friends who did enter illegally. I have friends who enter as refugees legally. I have people like me who came here on our own with our families to study. And anyway, so like there's so many ways of entering the country, but I guess two things kind of came apparent when we were talking. And one of them was particularly for Colombia, which I don't think it's unfortunately unique to Colombia, was how violence has been an aspect that has permeated our lives, even if you were not a direct victim of violence. Just growing up in Colombia and the history of violence that we have in Colombia was something that you carry with you because it's affected you and it's affected many, many generations. So that was one thing, this kind of Colombian aspect of how can we reconcile with these wounds that we carry, that we have. And the other aspect was, even when we come here, and I love how you said that, to find peace, what does peace look like? But also in immigration, they always talk about how we should settle as immigrants, which I was talking to someone earlier. I think it's interesting, this word settle, because in a country that is built on the genocide of indigenous people and the people who settle, like I don't think settling it's a good thing that we want anyway. But they always say that immigrants should settle. So what does it mean to settle? And I think to think about like, well, who am I and where am I and how am I going to settle in this place and what is this place? And I think as immigrants, perhaps because we lose a ground and we're always looking for somewhere to be, this idea of settling, it's complicated. And I think it should be complicated for Canada as a country as well, because Canada has settled in stolen land, so that's a problem. But to think about what it is to settle, I think as immigrants you're always kind of, I feel like you're always walking on shaky ground because you're here but you're not here. You carry things with you. There's good and bad things that you carry with you, and so it's complicated to be somewhere and to find peace. So how do you live? And this idea of settling, that it's a message that I think it's sent by a lot of places in Canada when they welcome newcomers, is like, oh, you should settle here, an immigration settler. We're going to help you settle. I really wanted to look at how complicated that is.
You know, I kind of more or less know about the immigration in Canada, and I was joking about maybe just to become a paralegal, maybe because that's how much I knew about it. And I don't want our interview about to be about immigration because there's the word that you have mentioned, that settling is like is you're right. It's like you are allowed to settle, but in the meantime, like even to talk about Aurora, like she has an excellent background, but is she able to do the job she was doing there? Because in the North American mind, what you know and what you the experience you may bring, it's never enough because we are so unique. Even for doctors, even for the, like, I understand if you're studying the law, Canada's law is different, but when you're a doctor, a human body, how is different the human body is in Colombia, in Saudi Arabia, or in Azerbaijan, or in I don't know, in Paris, than in Canada. Why it's so different? Are we so unique here in North America that we're supposed to feel? Like I said, I don't want to go get that far, but anyway.
I mean, but
So
it is, I mean, it's, you can ask about whatever you want, but it is a big part of what interests me in the film. And it's this idea too of like, what you're saying is like, well, is it to settle for me to become someone else so I can have space? Like, what is to settle? Like, what do you need to do to settle? Because then you're settling in a place. And again, this is a place that has a history, so it's not that simple. I can just come here and do what other settlers did and just take the land and make it mine. It's a process where we have to be with each other, but the problem is that we can't really be with each other because we don't have the power structures to be able to enter the structure. So then you're always on top of the structure, like you're always somewhere else, like you're not really you. Anyway, so and the film deals with this, I think. It's like, and how different generations do this, and language, and yeah.
it's like almost the perception that you feel you're believed to be the part of the system, but in reality you are not. It's just a perception. They create that that facade for you to believe it. So anyway, let's talk about Aurora. Like, like I said, I just like the character, and I like the actress. I'm afraid I may not be able to pronounce her last name, but I'm gonna say like a Noel. It's as a writer and as a director, when you develop a character such as this, like a very complex, like, when do you know that, okay, now I have developed her enough, and let me stick to what I know about her, and I want the audience to know about her what I know. How do you go around this kind of character development process for you? And when you know it's I'm done.
I mean, I think one of the great things about filmmaking is that you get to work with people. And I think that is one of the things that I'm most interested in. It's to be with people, because when you're with people, I don't know, things happen, you exchange things, you listen to each other. Speaking of structures, the filmmaking industry has this way where, like, as a director, you're supposed to create someone on paper, and then you're supposed to meet a human with flesh and experience in history, and then this person is supposed to become who you want them to become. And I'm not interested in that. I think it's a complex process where there's an exchange. So I knew some things about this Aurora character, and in the past, I've written scripts, and I was a little bit more flexible. Like, I would ask the actors to pick the name. But in this case, it's one of the first times that I had a lot of things for this character, because in the past, it was a little bit, I would say like, oh, choose your name, choose your profession. But her profession here was something that I brought to the table. So I wanted her to be called Aurora because Aurora in Spanish means dawn. I wanted her to be an environmental lawyer because that was important. So I made some decisions when I was writing, but I didn't want, I mean, I just didn't want to say like, this character is developed and now somebody has to like be her. I love working with actors because it's a process of inviting people to find access points with this character, but ultimately they're always people who have like flesh and bone. So it's like you're always working with someone who is there, who has a history, and I want some of the history to feed the character. So my work with Noelle, who I didn't know, and she's a Colombian actor and like model, but just had like a different path because she didn't choose to follow the celebrity sort of paths, and she's she was a single mother, and well, not a single mother, but she kind of raised her daughter on her own. Which is a very particular journey as an actor, which to me is interesting. So with her, we just worked a lot on trying to find ways that she could bring aspects of her life into the character. So some of the things that I did is that I tried to develop or prepare like a plan for this film to invite some of the actors to develop the character further, but not just me telling them. And I think that's what I'm trying to say. Like, it's not that I'm like, okay, this is who you are. I mean, some people do this and it's okay. Like, I just don't work like that. I don't want to say to Noel, this is who you are, and this is what happened to you, and this is why you are the way you are. Like, I don't want to feel like a doctor who's prescribing someone's past and future. Like, I'm not interested in that. But I have some ideas, and then together we can find how to give shape to a character that this person is going to have to embody in their own flesh. And that is a very vulnerable process, and it requires a lot of care. So with Noelle, I introduced her, for example, to friends of mine. So Lina, for example, who plays the character that welcomes her and gives her a hug. And so she's a friend of mine. She's a non-actor. She's a Colombian immigrant. She came here because of violence. She's been here for a long time. But so I asked Noelle and Lina to meet. So Lina could tell her a little bit about her story. I have a friend who crossed a border in the trunk of a bus, and he crossed. So I, invited her to have this conversation with this friend of mine about that experience. So I asked Noelle to just start talking to different people about this. I also introduced her to like people who were teaching other languages as teachers. She spent some time talking to people in a daycare stuff. So I just gave her some connections for her to start forming that. But we also wanted to borrow things from her own life. So Noelle, the actor, has a very close relationship with plants, for example. So we want, and I already had a scene where they were planting something. So when we were working with the costume department and the production design department, who's a friend of mine, we were having Zoom meetings, and Noelle was in Colombia. So we asked her to bring specific things from Colombia. It's like, what would you bring that would, make sense for you to bring? Because I like building spaces with people. So again, it's not a space where I'm going to say like, okay, Ulker, you're the actor and this is your home. And you'd be like, okay, like I want that home to have a piece of you. So I have a process where either you bring things that are yours and we mix them, or you have the opportunity, and we did this, where the mother and daughter, we had the space, but then they were able to go and move things and arrange them how they wanted. So there's a lot. I mean, and wardrobe too is a mixture of like personal clothes, but also other clothes. So nothing feels like it's my idea. I just want to try to open the door so people can contribute to it, and especially everybody, but especially the person who's going to have to be that person. Yeah.
Well, that's a very, very, very good answer in terms of like it actually covers other questions that I would have had. But it's a Canadian film, and in Canada the film industry is a bit different than in Hollywood. Maybe it's easier to reach the story in there, and it's harder in here because it's just different. Maybe it's more stricter, or it's just some kind of story that you need to bring, or it needs to be some kind of fascinating, right? What I wonder, how did you approach them, or was there a moment maybe there's some kind of in the story that they might wanted to change, so then they say, okay, now we can either fund you. How does it go? Like, so for instance, you have the related story, and then you go there and say, guys, this is what I have, and I want you guys to help me to film it. Okay? Do you normally have the creative control over what you have written, or what are the nuances? Because many people don't understand the concept of the independent cinema and how hard it is to sell the story. Stories like this will get into the bigger screens, but we'll know more stories like this than watching the Avengers. The Avengers is not a storytelling. This one is a storytelling.
Mm-hmm. And you mean, but how is it to talk to collaborators or to the funders?
We're the funders.
Well, I mean, this is my first film that has funding from Telefilm, which is a public institution that, thanks to all of our taxes, and that's a very lucky thing about Canada. Like I can say that, like the fact that we have public funding for culture and film, it's something that doesn't happen in all countries. Like it doesn't happen in the United States. People have to get private funding. But Telefilm is this different fund that is like for bigger films. So all of my films before I had made also with public funding, like Arts Council money. And the focus of Arts Council money is to support the artist and artistic vision. Telefilm has different requirements, but so we had to put in an application, and the application included script, a lookbook, and we had to talk about the audience plan, like who is this film for? And I think in a country that it is, largely composed by immigrants, I felt that it was a story that could hopefully talk about an immigration journey that is not stereotypical, that could just, show it with some nuance and maybe some poetry. I also wanted to talk particularly about the Latina community because, there is some representation in the US for Latina people. It's super stereotypical. So either it's like the hot seductress woman, or look, I've worked cleaning jobs. There's nothing wrong with being cleaning jobs, like I've done it, but like it's either like the stereotypes of someone who's a cleaner or someone who's a sexy seductress. So I wanted to just try to find a way that would be non-stereotypical and just kind of like try to show things that interest me, which has to do with mother and daughter, different women in different generations trying to see each other and settle and unsettle, both with the country and with each other. So yeah, it was a package that we put together where I talked about all of these things, and Telefilm has made some changes where I think it's trying to find a way to reframe what Canadian cinema is. And we go back to the same thing. Like, if we're going to talk about Canadian cinema, we have to talk about what Canada is. So what is Canada? And it's a complicated conversation, but we're all part of it. So I think this public funder it's shifted and starting to think about how can we think about what Canada is. And I think as an immigrant myself, I'm interested in contributing to that conversation. Like, what does it sound like to be Canadian? What does it look like to be Canadian? What is this Canadian life? And if we have the opportunity to tell our own stories, then we can contribute to just having different visions of what Canada is.
Thank you. I know we don't have much time, so I'm gonna ask just the last question. When you wrote the story, and then when now it's on the bigger screen, so it's how different is the story what you wrote in the beginning, your perception of your understanding it, and how it is after you saw it? Did it become different, or it's still the same? What do you see, and how you accept what you have made?
Yeah, no, that's a beautiful question. I think one of the things that I love about filmmaking is that it is a lesson in humility, because you always want things, but like in life, you can always get what you want. But I think that's a gift. So, the script and the film are very similar, but there's things that I was really interested in, like these sound aspects, where I wanted the sound to be disoriented and a texture. I wanted the film to start as a thriller and then become a family drama, and then kind of have aspects of being a thriller at the end. So all of these things are there. It's just like it changes. It changes because the woman that I wrote when I was writing, and then I met Noelle, and Noelle's like face is incredible, because I feel that she has an openness, a softness, a curiosity, a playfulness, but also like she carries some pain with her. That's just not even something that I can say that I expected. I was hoping for it, but it's like someone's face. It's a gift, and we were able to work together. And she's a lovely person. Natalia, who plays the daughter, is someone who immigrated here by herself. She's had her own immigrant experience, and for her to fill in this Lucia character that I had on paper, she gave life to it. And I think everything, like all of the relationships that we build around this film, because sometimes in filmmaking, they say that maybe the only important thing is what you see. So it's the people, the actors. There's a whole team behind that makes these films possible. So all of the relationships that we build, and Brad, who's my partner, and I really wanted to have a lot of different people, not because we wanted to hit some quota, but just because I'm an immigrant. So I wanted to have Latina people. I wanted to have people with different immigrant backgrounds, because that's Canada. I wanted to have people who had never made a feature film, who are younger, who feel that to enter the industry. So we, all of these things. It was my first time making a film in Canada, because my films had been in Colombia, and I was a little bit scared. So in that way, from the film that I wrote to the film that we have, it was such a gift to have this team make the film with us. And that's something that I didn't know when we were putting the film together. I was a little bit scared, because sometimes to not only make low budget films, but just to make films and to counter the way that the industry works, you have to make a very conscious decision to say, okay, we can't work in this way because it's not nice and we don't have a good time. So we have to make an effort to just, be careful and loving with each other. And the film is important, but the most important thing is that we work together and that we take care of each other. So yeah, I think at the beginning when I was writing, I didn't know we were going to be able to find a team here because a lot of my collaborators were in Colombia. But we found an amazing team. So that was a beautiful gift, and things change. And I think I make films because I want to be with people and I want things to change, but obviously they can't change or enough that if I started to make this film and it turned into a zombie movie, I mean, maybe that would be fun. But of course, there is a desire and there is a direction that I have, an intention that I have, and invite people to contribute to that intention and to help me like develop it and make it grow. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your time, and thank you so much for the film. Thank you so much for your hard work and bringing that story to us. So it educates us. It shows us a different aspect of people's life, perspectives, stories, and that we have simply no right to take not our life, the opportunity, and whatever that's come to give, and we cannot blame others for coming to Canada and thinking that, oh well, we have another extra person, like you said, about settling. In my idea, in my head, settling means we'll let other people will settle us in what we are in our head, in our mind. We don't have to go and destroy everything around. We just need to be what we are. We're not destroyed, we're the builders. But what we build on someone's shoulders, our future, or we build on our feet, as best time. That's what I think.
That's beautiful. Thank you for those words. That's really beautiful. I mean, it's true. How can we build together? But it's about building together, but it's complicated. But thank you so much, for those beautiful words that you just said, and for making the time to watch the film twice. And hopefully we get to cross paths again. And yes,
you never know. You never know.
I mean, here I'm not on Instagram a lot, but here's your Instagram like that. That's my Instagram, so we can connect if you want.
Sure, definitely.
Okay, Ulkar, thank you. And I look forward to your piece.
Yes, definitely.
I talk a lot, so I'm sorry. I was trying to talk.
Don't worry, I'm a top talker too, so it happens.
Okay, thanks so much.
Thank you so much.
Great day.
Thank you. You too. Thank you.
Thanks.